We later learned about the obsession that both Mr. Baca and Mr. Tanaka had.
Isolation is just really one of the worst things that you can do to a person. I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy.
Mr. Baca was a popular figure. He definitely had some cult of personality. This was an existential threat to the sheriff's department, but it was of their own making because of what they did.
I was under shotgun escort. It was the first time that somebody, I was around a gun that I knew could be used against me. It was the first time that I was around people that were doing life without parole. As an inmate, I'd been around lifers and stuff like that, but that's an entirely different setting. That's like going to the zoo and getting in the cage with the tiger. They know who you are. You're a cop.
James Sexton, the son of a Southern sheriff, had come to Los Angeles looking to make a name for himself as a cop and had won a spot in an elite jail intelligence unit. Now, at age 29, his law enforcement career was over in a particularly humiliating and final way. A federal judge had sentenced him to 18 months in federal prison for blocking the FBI's probe into the LA County jails, saying Sexton had lacked the courage, quote, to stand up when he knew things were wrong. When he turned himself in, Sexton was shuttled between different jails. In one of them, a black jail guard gave him the autobiography of Malcolm X.
And it was somebody clearly telling me something, right? This is what happened. That you're experiencing what marginalized communities are experiencing in America every day. And that person actually told me why they did it. Because as I was leaving, they're like, look, you're just here for a cup of coffee. You're actually, your prison and incarceration experience is nothing like the people that you're around. He even told me, he's like, I'm mad at you because people are going to want to hear how you survived. You're really seeing the front row seat of human tragedy, and I'd never been on the other side of the door. Just, the reality that door doesn't open. How loud it is, the lights don't turn off. In isolation, you don't even get to flush your own toilet. At this point, I knew I wasn't going to feel sorry for myself, so I made a calendar out of a comb. You can't control anything in there, and so I'd start to break the teeth out of this comb. I'm bald, right? So I don't need a comb, so that became my, that was my victory for the day. I would fight that tooth of that comb out, and I started with the bigger ones first. Because just mentally, I was like, as each day will get easier, right? Because it won't be so thick.
In the conspiracy to hide an informant from the feds, Sexton had been at the bottom of the chain of command. Federal prosecutors had worked their way up methodically through the ranks of the sheriff's department, and they had won a conviction against the former number 2 Paul Tanaka. Now, in late 2016, they had their eyes on number 1. They were gearing up to finally try Lee Baka, the former 4-term LA sheriff. He was 74 years old. His lawyers had him examined, and a doctor diagnosed him with Alzheimer's disease. Part of his defense would be that even as he ran the largest sheriff's department in the country, his mind had been deteriorating. From the Los Angeles Times, this is Pandora's Box, the fall of LA's sheriff. I'm Christopher Goffard. This is our 6th and concluding episode, The Other Side of the Door.
Almost everything they did was on tape. So we had from the beginning Deputy Smith, who was pounding the table saying that he wanted to know everything about the feds. That was a powerful recording that we had, where from the beginning it's set up that way.
I'm talking to Brandon Fox, who was the chief prosecutor in the case against former LA Sheriff Lee Baca. He had to prove that jailers had shuttled inmate informant Anthony Brown between cells under fake names to hide him from the feds, not, as the defense claimed, to protect him.
We later learned about the obsession that both Mr. Baca and Mr. Tanaka had with the FBI and U.S. Attorney's investigation into the conduct going on at the jails.
The prosecutor, who had transferred to L.A. from Chicago, learned that Baca's name had wide resonance in Los Angeles County. Many people loved him.
He definitely had some cult of personality.
Fox became aware of another problem. This was December 2016, weeks after Donald Trump won the presidency, and many blamed FBI Director James Comey for tilting the election by reopening the investigation into Hillary Clinton's emails.
As we were conducting jury selection, it was much harder to find people who trusted the FBI than I've ever had in any other trial. And not even close. I mean, there were several jurors that we had to dismiss who otherwise might have been good for us because they didn't trust the FBI, because they felt like the FBI had changed the course of the election.
During trial, Baca's supporters wore lapel pins in the shape of a badge. Prosecutors told jurors that Baca had been the heartbeat of the conspiracy and had ignored signs of corruption and inmate abuse at his jails. Baca's defense was that he had been in the dark about what his subordinates were doing to foil the feds. To paint a picture of how the inmate informant was made to disappear in the jails, prosecutors turned to the low-ranking jailer who'd actually executed the plan, James Sexton. He had agreed to testify for the government. He was taken from prison to the L.A. federal courthouse. He had lost 30 or 40 pounds during his months in lockup. He took the stand in his prison scrubs to describe how he had manipulated the antiquated jail computer system to hide the informant under a series of fake names. One thing prosecutors left out of their case was one of Baca's big falsehoods, his claim during a long, evasive interview that he had not known his sergeants were targeting FBI agent Leah Marx. To introduce that charge would have allowed Baca to claim his deteriorating mental state explained the false remark.
The reason why we had done that was he was putting out this defense that he had a memory lapse because he claimed that he had Alzheimer's / dementia, and we did not want that to be part of the case.
It was a risk. It meant the jurors would not hear about Alzheimer's, but neither would they get to hear Baca's incriminating interview with the federal prosecutor. They did hear, thanks to the defense team, about Baca's efforts at jail reform. They heard that Baca had launched a civilian watchdog group to monitor his agency. They heard some of Baca's prominent friends, including 2 former LA County district attorneys, testify to his law-abiding reputation. They heard from the father of a slain deputy who said Baca had consoled him and had given him his home phone number. These character witnesses described a long career of public service and integrity. As the jury panel was deliberating, one of the alternate jurors approached the defendant to ask for his autograph, hardly a good sign for the government. 11 of the 12 jurors thought Baca was not guilty. A single man on the jury held out for guilt. It was a deadlock. One of the jurors who voted not guilty was seen in tears. Brandon Fox believed the free-floating distrust of the FBI, coupled with local admiration for Baca, tilted the jury against prosecution.
I did interview a couple of jurors afterward. There were some people who gave Mr. Baca way more benefit of the doubt because of who he was.
As the feds prepared to retry Baca, James Sexton was enduring prison in an isolation unit. Because of his specialized training in jails and in jail intelligence, he says, the Bureau of Prisons deemed him a risk. On top of that, he was a government witness, both factors that would have made him a potential target in the general population.
It was absolutely horrible. I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. Isolation is just really one of the worst things that you can do to a person.
Whenever I met with Sexton, he brought along his service dog. He said it was a consequence of that experience.
It's really corrosive mentally, especially if you have an active mind. I beat myself up. I evaluated every relationship that I cognitively could recall from, 4 years old. You get into crib memories almost, and you really start to beat yourself up, and there's no release to that. And it got worse day by day, week by week. You can really feel the oppressiveness of time.
After a while, hallucinations began.
Those were starting to happen month 4 and 5. And that's based on sensory deprivation. At that point, I've seen nothing but the colors, orange, white, black, gray. No blue sky, no natural light unless you're in a transport, or no watches, no clocks. You have to have 85 unencumbered cubic feet. So enough to stand up and do a push-up in. You see nothing else other than the bricks and the steel. So they really start to make you feel like you're Hannibal Lecter. Very limited contact with people. You start to become disoriented from time. That's the first thing that happens. You start to lose touch with how long an hour is, how long a day is. Yeah. That was scary. You become very numb to things that you normally wouldn't be numb to. Light, sound, gates smacking, people fighting, yelling. And you become incredibly sensitive to shit that irritates you. Squeaky wheel in a cart, right? Whatever it may be. And so you start this dystopia starts to happen. And then you can't manage your emotions is the next thing, because you feel so detached and you got nothing to anchor to. You start to have these really high highs and really low lows, and nobody gives a shit. I remember there'd be days where I would just roll, and you can't show this weakness either because there's still a support network that you have to be a part of. I remember rolling my bunk up and just screaming into it because I hurt.
Sexton agreed to testify against Lee Baca at his retrial. He was flown back to LA on Con Air.
I'm fresh off of Con Air. I've been down for 4 or 5 months. I'm 150 pounds soaking wet. I'm stressed. I'm stinky. I'm scraggly.
Someone handed him a burrito, which he ate hungrily. He was ready for anything besides prison food. For the first time since his sentencing, he saw prosecutor Brandon Fox.
Brandon was like, James, I see a lot of maturity in you. And I put the burrito down and I go, hell, Brandon. This time I'm about to turn 30. I was like, that's just called maturity, man. You didn't have to send me to prison to have me grow up a little bit.
In January 2017, after 4 months in prison, the last of which he'd spent in solitary confinement, Sexton appeared before Judge Percy Anderson. "I stand before you as a broken man," he said. To Fox, Sexton looked like a changed man, no longer the cocky 25-year-old with a chip on his shoulder, but a man humbled by his experience. At Fox's request, the judge reduced his sentence to time served. Sexton would be allowed to go home after serving 4.5 months of his 18-month sentence. His wife Keely picked him up.
I get in the car with Keely. She's like, I don't know how to tell you this, but I got to run an errand. And I was like, okay. We pull up to this FedEx. Mind you, I've been in prison for, 6 months. And she's like, do you want to sit in the car? I was like, no, I don't want to sit in the car. And, but I did the weirdest thing. I walked in and the door opened at FedEx, right? And I played with the opening door for like 3 minutes. I swear to God, just because the doors were open. And they don't rack and roll like the sliders do. Sliders go, yeah, you're at a low point in your life when you're grateful that a door opens.
federal prosecutors had finally taken Lee Baca to trial, but only managed to persuade one of the 12 jurors that he was guilty. Revamping their case, they would include the charge that Baca had knowingly lied to the feds. This would allow jurors to hear him on tape.
Were you aware that anybody within LASD was conducting surveillance of Leah Marx at night outside of her home?
No.
Baca's defense team fought to put a geriatrician on the stand to talk about his Alzheimer's diagnosis, a way of explaining away his false statements. The judge blocked the testimony, hamstringing the defense.
You've listened to the recording. He's not forgetful. It's not an Alzheimer's issue. This is an issue of him affirmatively lying to us. At no point in time were briefed that she would be the named suspect in a felony complaint, correct?
That's correct.
And talking to experts in the field, people don't just make up facts when they have Alzheimer's. They will just be forgetful. And he was lying to us about what was happening. So we felt like that was an important part of the trial. And then we sprinkled his voice throughout the trial. Now the jury's hearing his voice. And so he's more connected to the incident.
I wanted to talk to Baca's defense attorney, Nathan Hochman, who is now the district attorney of Los Angeles County, but he did not respond to requests. When Baca went on trial again in March 2017, liberal Los Angeles felt differently about FBI boss Jim Comey, who was probing possible ties between Russia and Donald Trump's presidential campaign.
So the second time they were a popular institution in Los Angeles.
Yes. Yes, and that's where our jury came from, so that's all that mattered to me.
Once again, James Sexton testified for the prosecution, but this time as a free man in civilian clothes. Another forceful prosecution witness was former Assistant Sheriff Cecil Rambo, who said he told Baca that it was a crime to obstruct an FBI investigation and had bluntly warned him, "Don't f with the feds." As part of a more fleshed-out case, prosecutors called convicted high-ranking co-conspirators to the stand. One was former Captain Tom Carey, who said Baca had personally approved the plan to send sergeants to Leah Marx's house. By Carey's damning account, quote, "His advice to us was just not to put handcuffs on her." Another conspirator, former Lieutenant Greg Thompson, said Baca had compared his duel with the feds to a chess match. Brandon Fox ran with the image, portraying the aging lawman as a craven king who hid behind subordinates.
So I actually took out a king from my chessboard at home, and I showed it to the jury. And at the conclusion of making this argument, instead of saying checkmate or anything like that, the jury's right in front of me. I'm standing at the lectern, I make this argument, and then I quietly turn it over, which is a sign that the game is over and that the king has been defeated.
This time, in March 2017, jurors convicted Lee Baca. He was the 10th and highest-ranking participant in the obstruction scheme known as Pandora's Box. The big question now was what to do with a former lawman in his mid-70s and in mental decline. His lawyer pleaded with the judge, saying Baca's Alzheimer's was its own terrible punishment. Quote, "A sentence that will leave him a mere shell of his former self and one that will rob him of the memories of his life." Hundreds of letters of support poured in for Lee Baca. One came from former Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger. People praised his character, his integrity, his good works for inmates and at-risk youth. Under federal guidelines, Baca's crimes called for about 4 years in prison, but prosecutors asked for a sentence of 2, citing his age and, quote, severely impaired state. Instead, U.S. District Judge Percy Anderson gave him 3 years. He excoriated Baca for abusing the public trust and embarrassing, quote, the thousands of men and women who put their lives on the line every day. Baca remained free, living at home in San Marino while the courts weighed his appeals. He kept to a schedule. He went on morning runs. He went to lunches. Finally, after 3 years of failed appeals, he was ordered to report to federal prison. He was now 77. An LA Times editorial questioned the wisdom of locking him up. Taxpayers would cover his medical care in prison, and there was small chance he would do harm again. Baca turned himself in at the Federal Correctional Institution in La Tuna, a low-security facility outside El Paso. Details of Baca's prison experience are available in Karen Richardson's friendly biography of him. In it, we learn that Baca's wife, Carol, worried that he would not be able to remember how to call home, so she made sure to give her cell phone to a prison guard. We learn that during COVID-19, the prison went on lockdown and Baca was not able to see her for 16 months. We learn that she sensed his memory worsening and his confusion growing during their daily 15-minute phone calls. He stuck to his workout regimen in lockup, doing rounds of squats and push-ups. His zeal for order and desire to be of service did not desert him. He reorganized the prison library and renovated the prison pond and cleared brush from the grounds, and according to the book, inspired other inmates by his example. He made friends. He gave advice. He told people to make use of their time. He went home in October 2021. In July 2024, the 82-year-old Baca wandered away from home in San Marino and could not be found. He turned up 6 miles away at an El Monte Denny's a few hours later in a badly confused condition. His name and phone number were on his medical bracelet, and police arrived to take him home. After prosecuting the case against the LA Sheriff's commanders, Brandon Fox went into private practice. I asked him about the relative culpability of Sheriff's Department leaders. He said he blamed former Undersheriff Paul Tanaka more than he did Baca. He described Baca as a mix of good and bad.
When you talk about someone of that age, someone who's served the public for so long, and someone who does have or did apparently have a serious medical issue, it's harder to prosecute those people.
You felt some pity for him at some point? For those reasons?
Empathy toward him. I'm not sure pity. I wouldn't say pity.
Why is this case important? Why does it matter?
I argued before the juries, probably just about every jury in these cases, that no man is above the law and no one is beneath it. And no case exemplifies it more than this one, because you've got the victims that are people who are inmates confined in an area. Some of them have great mental illness, and society's written them off in large part. If we could convict the highest ranking law enforcement officer in Los Angeles County of obstruction of justice and false statements, then you can believe that many juries will also do the same.
To me, one of the puzzles of the case has always been, what was Lee Baca thinking? Did he think sending his sergeants to confront an FBI agent at her home would scare the whole agency off? Did he actually believe the federal government, after years of effort, would just shrug and walk away? Fox tells me Baca's endgame seemed to be that he wanted to be part of the jailhouse investigation, so that when it came time to announce jailers were being indicted for excessive force, Baca could stand there at the podium and make the case that he had participated in the effort. In the end, Baca's wounds were mostly self-inflicted.
If you look at everything that we did and all the convictions we had, you take away the obstruction case, we bring a handful of civil rights cases, which Baca probably would have been reelected if that's the only thing that happened. He probably would have served another term as sheriff. And all the big prosecutions we did was because of how they reacted. This was an existential threat to the sheriff's department, but it was of their own making because of what they did.
One of the ironies is that Anthony Brown, the career criminal and inmate informant who was made to vanish for 18 days, would never have been a good witness.
You want me to talk? I need a couple things.
What do you need?
Y'all can accommodate him.
Cup of coffee?
Cheeseburger. Give me a cigarette and a soda.
Prosecutors never called him to the stand, knowing the defense was likely to eviscerate him, possibly tainting their whole case. What about the cell phone that so enraged the sheriff and provoked his catastrophic decisions? In the end, Brown managed to get nothing of evidentiary value on it.
Nothing of great significance at all. For anybody, there was nothing other than the fact that he downloaded music.
Anthony Brown is in state prison serving his 400-plus years. From prison, he filed suit against the county, claiming the sheriff's department had effectively kidnapped him during those 18 days, and the LA Board of Supervisors approved a $1 million payout to settle the claim. In the end, 22 members of the sheriff's department were convicted as a result of the probe initiated by Special Agent Leah Marx, who had barely been out of her rookie year with the FBI when she got a letter from an inmate alleging brutality at Men's Central Jail and decided to pursue it. The two agents who worked the case with her, Jason Dalton and David Dolly, were also new to the Bureau. I asked Brandon Fox if that might have played a role in how it all unfolded.
The fact that Special Agent Marks got that letter and decided to act on it is amazing that it turned into what it did, because most agents would have not paid a second to it and would have just said, it's not worth my time. A veteran agent of many years who's looking at retirement does not do anything with that letter. You look at all the other times that these allegations had been raised and nothing had happened over the decades before that.
I asked Leah Marx whether she thought older agents might have handled the tip differently.
Coming in with fresh eyes and just being that go-getter because I was new, I do think that helped kind of dive into something that maybe others wouldn't have. We don't know how many more civil rights cases we could have brought because the department came in and disrupted our investigation. They tried to intentionally stop what we were doing. And so sadly, we don't know where it would have gone. And that's a little frustrating.
She said that by the time it was over, there were 13 trials from start to finish. The case took up 8 years of her life. She was ready to move on. She worked for a while at the Bureau's Behavioral Analysis Unit, the unit that studies serial killers, and is now supervising a corruption civil rights squad. I asked her how the case has affected her career inside the FBI.
What happened became more of a, I don't want to say a folklore, but, oh, you're the agent that almost got arrested. So it was, for some people, it became less of a focus on the case and more about what actually kind of transpired at my apartment.
In its own weird way, this was great for me in my life, in my maturity and my humility. I'm probably one of the rare people that would tell you that prison reformed me.
This is James Sexton.
I was not the easiest person to deal with in those days. Being an asshole is not illegal, and I'm paying the crime. I'm paying for that every day. I pay for that, and I accept that.
Did the prosecutions have any permanent effect on the culture or structure of the LA County Sheriff's Department? That's hard to say. Voters picked the sheriff directly. In 2018, the combative and controversial Alex Villanueva won the job. Mike Giannacco, an attorney who monitored the Sheriff's Department for 13 years, compared Baca's tenure to Villanueva's. He said Baca did more for civil rights and progressive policing than he's credited with, and that, quote, Villanueva did more damage to that department in the 4 years he was there than Baca did in 15 years, exponentially in my view, end quote. In August, the current sheriff Robert Luna announced what he called a milestone: 6 months of compliance with a court settlement that called for better jail conditions. That includes improvements in mental health services and reduced wait times for housing inmates after they arrive. The Sheriff's Department still has a policy of putting rookie deputies to work in the jails, which the department says trains them to better interact with the public when they get on patrol. A department spokesperson told me that uses of force are trending downward, that there are now more than 4,000 cameras in the jails, and that jailers will be getting body-worn cameras soon. But this month, California Attorney General Rob Bonta said the State Department of Justice will sue the LA Sheriff's Department over what he called a humanitarian crisis inside the jail system. He noted dilapidated, overcrowded conditions, plus more than 200 in-custody deaths over the last 4 years. 40% were homicides, suicides, or overdoses. The heartbeat of the jail operation remains the sprawling and antiquated Men's Central Jail in downtown, now more than 60 years old. Twice, the County Board of Supervisors has voted to close it down. The Sheriff's Department has cited the difficulty of finding an alternative, considering the enormous volume of inmates in a county of 10 million people. Pandora's Box, The Fall of LA's Sheriff, was written and reported by me, your host, Christopher Goffard, for the Los Angeles Times. Mix and sound design by Emily Jankowski. Our editor is Steve Clow. Thanks to LA Times executive editor Terry Tang, president and COO Chris Argenteri, and LA Times Studios president Anna Magzanian. Special thanks to LA Times colleagues past and present who have reported on the Sheriff's Department and its scandals, including Robert Federecci, Jack Leonard, Joel Rubin, Cindy Chang, Ben Poston, Eileen Chekmedian, Connor Sheets, and Carrie Blakinger.